My name is Dan Green. I've been at Fermi Lab for many years, and I've spent now essentially 30 years on the CMS experiment at CERN, at the Large Hadron Collider.
What was the transition from the SSC to CMS like?
Well, it was kind of fraught, actually. There was an agreement signed between the funding agencies and CERN. Then there was something called the Joint Oversight Group. Finally, in 1999, that's 7 years later, there was a project that the U.S. physicists were going to do for CMS. It's called baseline. That means you have a defined schedule input. At that point, we were more than 20% complete because we had been working with some R&D money. For Fermi Lab, they became the host laboratory. They said, we will take responsibility institutionally for the success of CMS. And also, there was a comparable amount of money in support of the LHC accelerator. U.S. took responsibility for what is called the low beta magnets. Those are the ones that focus down to the smallest possible size so that the reaction rate is maximized. Now we had a project.
So which parts of the experiments were the U.S. groups interested in?
There was already a nascent CMS and Atlas experiment, but they hadn't actually captured the resources to succeed in those experiments in a timely way. I thought the best strategy was to take a complete system that we design, procure, and build in the U.S. and ship it over, because that would get the interested groups working together, nucleating. We took full responsibility for the barrel calorimeter, for the hadrons, for the forward muon system, and the level 1 trigger. We were about at 1/3 of the collaboration by dollar or by people. When we designed this project, we carved out what's called contingency, which means I think I can do it for this much, I'm going to leave this much over. And the reason for that was, we really never done this before. So we kept more than 40% contingency. And that turned out to be quite useful. We could actually upscope. We completed the project in 2005. We were on time, we were on budget. Unfortunately, we shipped these complete systems to what is called the assembly hall, which is this on the surface at the collision point. But that's 100 meters underground, and that was not actually finished on time. So we had to invent something called a slice test, which turns out many experiments after that have done. That means you got a certain piece of your apparatus, and it goes through several steps. You have a track going through or some signal. You have some detector. It makes a signal. You have the trigger on it. You have to go through data acquisition, front-end electronics. You send serially to computers. It's very useful to test the whole system from beginning to end. You can shake out a lot of possible glitches. So we did slice tests up in the assembly hall running cosmic ray triggers. And that means when we went downstairs, we were ready immediately. The collision hall was completed in 2007. 2010, we got a little bit of collisions. 2011 was better. 2012 was getting towards their actual design.
Were you surprised at all by the Higgs discovery?
If you believe the standard model and you believe the Higgs a part of it, it was pretty clear we were going to find it as soon as we got enough collisions. Philosophically, the Higgs is some field which permeates all space and is constant in all time. It's not my favorite model, but nature didn't ask me my opinion. Okay.
Can I ask you to talk a little bit about some of the people who worked on the detectors and the electronics in the early days?
Well, we can start from the beginning.
Yeah.
The forward pixels, that was Joel Butler. And tracking, it was Joanne Candela. For the eCal, there was a very strong CERN group that were pushing crystals as detectors because they give you a very good energy resolution. And in fact, that's the easiest way we found the Higgs. We found it into 2 photons. They were my colleagues from Minnesota. Roger Rusak was working on the avalanche photodiodes. They are like photodiodes, but you need more signal, and so they have some gain in it. And so that was a new thing that was developed. Calorimeter, a lot of that came from Fermi Lab, Rochester, Iowa, people like that. And in the muon, the Florida group led that. Genna Mitzelmacher, he was the level 2 manager for that system. And the Wisconsin people, they built those structures. And in order to keep to the schedule, we had to have multiple assembly sites for these things. So, for example, Florida was one of the sites. UCLA was another site. So
The LHC Physics Center. When did that come about?
we tried to form a community at Fermi Lab, invented something called the LHC Physics Center and the Remote Operations Center. Basically, the experiment is 100 meters underground, and nobody's down there. It's much too active. So all the interaction of data taking and looking at the quality of the data is remote. So we said, okay, well, this is the modern world, so we will set up a remote center in Fermi Lab. We put it down on the ground floor so that everyone could see that, oh, these people are doing a nice experiment, very interesting. People come through, they like to tour, they like to look at the data coming in. We have a guest and visitors program, we have a visiting scholar program, we have workshops, or we have data analysis schools. They can come to the LPC. I believe it's been quite a success.
What do you see as a mission for the LPC?
It's to enable the U.S. CMS physics community to zero order and to higher orders, obviously working within the CMS experiment. For example, for the first time in its history, Fermi Lab has a joint summer school alternating between CERN and Fermi Lab. That's the first time Fermi Lab ever did that.
I personally have been to very many LPC events and found it to be an extremely useful structure in the U.S.
It's very important when you start a culture to try to get it right, because it's very hard for people to change. So we started very early on in designing that and baselining the ops program, the LPC and the ROC. We tried to have a plausible system.
Because I always send my students to join the CMS data analysis. And then they see this as the center for interactions with the rest of the collaboration, at least from the US side. And it's been an extremely useful resource.
Another reason I think it's useful or has been successful is that even within CMS, which tends to be centered on CERN, we're starting to see remote operations. Almost a decade ago, IHUB Beijing inaugurated a remote operations center so they could do shifts, because China is quite a long way away from Switzerland. We'd like to say the sun never sets on CMS. I always said that my job was to find the best people, tell them what we're trying to do, and turn them loose. It's not rocket science.
Thank you.